Like any little girl, Victoria Arlen had big dreams. The 11-year-old triplet was the picture of a healthy and happy child. She, like many of her friends, loved to dance and swim. Victoria also loved to run, and she was a promising young athlete. But all of a sudden, that began to change. At first, in what her mother described as just a misalignment of her stars, she had a series of recurring minor illnesses. She suffered from the flu, then pneumonia, asthma attacks, and even fainting spells. As time wore on, her coordination began to fail and she started to trip over her feet. Eventually, Victoria lost use of her legs altogether. Then she began to have difficulty controlling the movements of her arms, head, and body. Next, she began to have trouble swallowing, and eventually, she ended up in what doctors told her family was a vegetative state. At first, Victoria's doctors were baffled, and couldn't explain to her family why her health had declined so rapidly. Later, after a barrage of tests, she was diagnosed with a combination of transverse myelitis and acute disseminated encephalomyelitis, two rare autoimmune diseases. Her condition had caused severe inflammation of the brain and spine, which meant that her nervous system was under attack, and the doctors feared that the damage would be irreversible. After sharing their diagnosis with Victoria's mother, Jacqueline, the doctors advised her to take Victoria home. They said she would probably never come out of her coma-like state. For 4 years, as she lay in bed wasting away, suffering from recurring seizures for up to 20 hours each day, Victoria's family refused to give up on her. Jacqueline remembered feeling very alone, because even the doctors couldn't understand Victoria's illness, and had no idea what to expect. They couldn't guide the Arlen family or provide them with a real support system. So the family supported each other, and they cared for Victoria in shifts, taking turns sitting by her side and talking to her, hoping against hope that someday she would wake up. Little did they know that, though Victoria's body was paralyzed, she was mostly alert and aware of what was happening around her. It was a terrifying experience for Victoria to hear the doctors preparing her family for her eventual death. She could hear what the doctors were saying about her and was fully aware of what was going on around her, but, try as she might, she couldn't control her body enough to communicate, no longer even able to blink or move her eyes as she wished. While locked in her body, lying in a seemingly vegetative state, Victoria watched Jacqueline cry after being told her daughter would not survive the illness. Even then, she couldn't communicate her own distress. Day after day, Victoria lay there, afraid, in pain and powerless. She knew that if she simply stopped fighting to survive, the pain and suffering would end, but she refused to, as she put it, take the easy way out. That was when Victoria decided that, instead of lamenting her condition, she would instead concentrate on strengthening what she could fix, her mind. During the long hours of the latter half of her illness, she spent time praying and visualized what life would look like when she was healthy again. She also began to write screenplays in her head. I kept reminding myself of what was good and that I was still there, she said. In 2009, 3 months after her 15th birthday, while doctors were experimenting with medications to help control her seizures and let Victoria sleep, a miracle happened. One day, Victoria woke up and realized she had control of her eyes. She recalls her mother entering the room shortly afterward and being determined to communicate. She started directly at Jacqueline, who finally realized that her daughter was awake.